that. Holding on line 5, Senator Mark Warner. Are you calling collect?
Just because we're $16.5 trillion in debt, should I also make you guys pay as well?
You got to have a little gallows humor, man. This is out of control crazy.
I hear you. How y'all doing?
Hey, we're doing great. It's good to have you with us on the program this morning. Thanks for coming on today. And let's talk about, the only thing I know about sequestration is that it's worth 22 points at Scrabble. So with that said, can you give us the 4-year-old's primer on sequestration?
Right. Remember back in August of 2011 when the United States almost defaulted?
Yes.
And we had that debt ceiling thing, and everybody thought Congress was really stupid. They didn't know how stupid we were going to get.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, to make it look like they were being tough, they cut a deal at the top that said, okay, we're going to create the stupidest thing possible, the worst kind of mind-numbing cuts possible, because no rational group of people would ever allow that to happen. And then they set up the so-called super committee, but the super committee whiffed. And then we had the fiscal cliff, and we only did a partial deal.
Right.
So now, coming on March 1st, there are these cuts that are going to hit every part, particularly defense, but also non-defense.
Yeah.
And it's going to say, we're not going to look at how programs, how effective they are or not. We're just going to cut everything indiscriminately. All 975, for example, separate line items in the Navy will be cut. Now, all 975 separate programs in the Navy aren't of equal value.
Right.
But they're going to say, we're not going to choose. We're just going to cut them all 7%.
Wow.
The problem with that is unlike a normal business that you kind of run one year to another, you can maybe absorb those kind of cuts. But with the Navy, for example, one year you bring in the USS Abraham Lincoln for major repair, and the next year you take it out to sea, or the Truman gets deployed. These accounts between one year and another vary greatly on the Navy side and on the defense side. So if sequestration hits, we're going to have these kind of unforeseen effects. We started to see that when the Truman didn't deploy last week.
Absolutely.
We're going to see shipbuilding put off for the second half of the year. We're going to see us actually cost the taxpayer money by breaking contracts. When the U.S. government buys, instead of buying one airplane, you buy 5 airplanes, you get the 5 airplane discount.
Right.
If we have to buy them one by one because we can't honor these multi-purchase contracts, in the name of cutting, we cost the taxpayer money. So the end result is there is a stupid way to do cuts and a less stupid way to do cuts.
All right.
My hope would be that, I've got Plan A and Plan B. Plan A is still hoping for a rational approach that says, okay, Republicans, you got to put in some more revenue. Democrats, you got to go ahead and kick in some reforms to entitlement programs. We all have to realize that even defense is going to have to get some additional cuts. But let's go back to a big bipartisan deal. Plan B is, if that doesn't happen, because so far I've been trying for that for 2.5 years and come up with goose eggs.
Yes.
Plan B is, if we're going to go through these cuts, at least let's go ahead and allow the Secretary of the Navy or the Secretary of Health to move money from one account to another so they can make some level of business judgment which things need to be cut, which ones don't need to be cut. Still got to get your top-line number, but give them some flexibility. How's that for an explanation?
That's a great explanation. It's complicated. It's clearly partisan. Do the people in Congress, do the 535, do they know this affects them too?
Well, I don't think they know how bad it is. I don't think, I kind of get into the numbers. I'm a little bit of a budget geek.
Yeah.
So I don't think they've looked at the fact that they think, well, any business can absorb 5%, 6%, 7% cuts. Yeah, that makes sense on one level, but what you don't understand, if in 1 year, one account might have $10 million in it, and the next year it might have $500 million in it, because particularly with the Navy, it flexes up and down based upon the operational needs.
Sure.
So the idea that you're going to, the fact that it was in 2012 it was one number, and in 2013 it's, 50x that number. If you cut the same amount it just doesn't. It has a disproportionate effect. I don't think most members understand that yet, and I think there's a group, and there's blame on both sides. There's some on the Democrat side who say, well, we finally want to cut defense. There's some on the Republican side that say, oh, we want to cut. We don't care what happens. The group of folks, my so-called gang, or the folks of us who are trying to say, hold, time out, let's both sides give a little bit. We keep getting squeezed out because the screamers on both sides tend to get more attention.
Yeah, we're talking to Senator Mark Warner. In fact, one of your Gang of Six guys, Saxby Chambliss, he's just out. He's not coming back, right?
Yeah, I was down in Georgia a week or so ago when we came out together. Yeah, he's a good guy. I mean, he got a lot of grief for being willing to step up and say, hey, the balance sheet doesn't work without additional revenues. I think he would have won again. He's a good guy. The thing that we need, that I keep asking folks is, if folks are upset, and they got a right to be upset, they all individually got to get out of their political foxholes too. If you're a listener and you're a Democrat, go support a Republican who's willing to do additional revenues. If you're a Republican, go support a Democrat who's willing to do entitlement reforms. Because until we reinforce behavior that's moderate, you're going to end up with more and more of these guys on both ends.
This is not now, and of course, yourself, Senator Kaine, you understand how important this sequester, or what a huge impact this is going to have. But for somebody that's in Kansas or Iowa or someplace that's maybe away from defense assets, just for one example, is it more difficult to get the message through that this is a big deal?
Well, if they don't have something that's happening in their community as traumatic effect, but it's not just defense. Let me give you another example. The National Institute of Health does a lot of funding on disease research.
Sure.
We may have times where you've got a 5-year study, you've done 4 years of the study, but you can't issue the contracts for the 5th year because of the sequester cut, because you got to pay the whole amount. If you don't have the whole amount, you're getting cut, 8 or 9% regardless of where you are in your study. So you got to flush the results of the first 4 years.
Wow.
Which again costs the taxpayer money.
Yeah,
I don't think people know how stupid this was set up to be so stupid that nobody in their right mind would allow it to happen. My hope is, and this is the thing that I know people in Hampton Roads scratch their head, but I got to tell you, I'm up there scratching my head.
Yeah.
You keep trying to pound your way to get into the room, but on all these things, it seems like they also always wait until it's 11:59 on the eve of this thing happening.
Right.
So we got about another 2 weeks to see if we can sort something out. But, I'm hoping, I'm pushing. I've got an alternative plan out there. But the thing that you find is too much of this is team sports as opposed to who's actually fighting for the country.
Senator Mark Warner, not exactly a happy face on this one.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be this darn hard.
No, it shouldn't.
I mean, it's kind of like, and I know people are saying, all right, well, listen, Warner, you're up there. Well, why can't you get more? I keep working these groups, trying to get the bipartisan groups, but trying to get people to fall outside their red shirt, blue shirt, kind of, red team Republican, blue team Democrat team colors is harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, no, that's clear. It has become incredibly frustrating. And from where we sit, and we're just regular folks, and we talk to, 50 people a day probably on the telephone. And, you read about it in the paper. We talk to you from time to time. It's like, what as a group are these people doing?
Well, it's kind of like every issue gets built into a crisis now. Every negotiation, it feels like, waits until the 11th hour. I think people are kind of getting, they're getting budget crisis overload at this point.
Yeah.
And each time, we get up to the 11th hour and we kind of limp through, my fear is on this one, we may actually kind of go over the edge a little bit, and you may end up seeing certain things happen. And again, you're starting to see this. We didn't even have to wait till March 1st.
With the Truman.
For this to start happening.
Sure.
And and the thing is, just to make you a little more indigestion in the morning, we've got sequestration on March 1st.
Yeah.
And then we've got something called the continuing resolution, which is the budget from 2012 being put into 2013 without being amended, which again is particularly bad to things like the Navy because even under a rational approach, these accounts flex up and down dramatically more than normal operations.
Right.
That's almost another whammy that hits at the end of the month. So my hope is we're going to get back and do rational, regular order, do a budget. And I'm glad this thing we passed last week. We don't do a budget, we don't get paid.
We're talking to Senator Mark Warner. I ran into a friend of mine at church yesterday who I was just at his Truman deployment party 2 weeks ago, and I offered to give back the beer and Cheetos because I felt bad. It's just like, are we going to have a welcome back party too? Poor guy.
Well,
a lot of this too, I'm sorry, but a lot of this goes to people. They get psyched up for these deployments. Your family gets geared up for it, and to stand down like this is, man, it's frustrating.
I don't think people realize that outside of a community like Hampton Roads, because not only do they get psyched up, but you got people that go ahead and sell their car or let their apartment or sublet their apartment. This has a dramatic effect.
Right.
And my sense is kind of at the. I don't want to give undue optimism because I'm going to be viewed as Pollyannish. I gotta believe that even if we go over this sequestration mini cliff, that it will get resolved. But at least with the Plan B that allows folks to move some of these accounts around. But that's one of the reasons why we missed such an opportunity around New Year's. Why we did this kind of half-baked deal that simply again kicked the can. I mean,
just pushed it down the road, right?
The fact of the matter is, for all your listeners, we raised some revenues. At the end of the year, we're going to have to raise some more. We're going to have to go ahead and make some changes to Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid. We are going to have to make some cuts. The sooner we bite the bullet and do all three of those things in a comprehensive way, the better. And from my view, is that, and this is the part that just makes me crazy, is that I think if we got a real plan, we kind of took this budget stuff off the table for a while, it would actually do more for job growth than anything that Romney or Obama were talking about in the campaign last fall, because the economy is ready to come back. We just need to get rid of this piece of uncertainty.
It's the uncertainty. That's right.
As I said before, again, the listeners are going to go, oh, my God, these guys, Warren, these guys in Congress, let me give them one piece of optimism. When I get really frustrated on this, I always remember that great Winston Churchill quote. Churchill, Prime Minister of England during World War II, and it was in the dark days after the Nazis had conquered all of Europe, and England was fighting on alone, and wasn't sure what the United States was going to do. And Churchill said so boldly, you can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else.
When there's nothing left to do, we will do the right thing.
Right.
God bless America.
We've got to count on that Churchill quote coming around again.
Absolutely. Hey, Senator Mark Warner. Mark, thanks very much for talking to us this morning.
All right, guys. Have a great Monday.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye.